Humans are distinguished by their ability to interpret the various phenomena that occur in their surrounding environment into useful information. This ability allowed humans to find the scientific method, form a philosophy about the nature of existence, and devise complex mathematical models. Although humans possess this talent, this does not necessarily mean that they are able to explain or understand everything that confronts them in the world. Humans tend to be narrow-minded in the beliefs they form about the world around them. Once humans have an idea about how the world works, they tend to stick to it. But because human knowledge is constantly evolving and expanding, this dogmatic approach to understanding the world may not have a logical basis. 200 years ago, for example, doctors and scientists were confident in their knowledge of medicine. But their knowledge and understanding of medicine may seem ironic today, because humans are attached to their beliefs and basic ideas that they believe in, may make them ignorant of those concepts that fall outside the models that they formed previously. This kind of dogmatic thinking can present unfamiliar events to humans as big surprises. We are sometimes surprised by events, not because they are random or out of the ordinary or logical, but because our view is too narrow. These surprises are known as Black Swan events, and they can cause us to fundamentally reconsider our view of the world. For example, before anyone saw black swans, people assumed that all swans were white. Because of this, all their images and perceptions of the swan were white, which meant that the color white was an essential part of the swan. So when they discovered the first black swan, it basically transformed their understanding of what a swan's could be. The concept of black swan may apply to various aspects of life. But the point here is that black swan events are events that are believed to be outside the realm of the ordinary or possible. But when it does, it changes people's understanding of some of their previous beliefs in life. The impact of black swan events can be different for different nature of people, and that effect is renewed through your access to relevant information. The more information you have, the less likely you are to be affected by black swan events. And the more ignorant you are, the more vulnerable you will be to the shock of these events. Suppose a person named George has recently begun to follow the sport of horse racing. On his first visit to the racetrack, George is impressed by a horse named Rocket. It turns out to George that Rocket has a proven track record of victories and is ridden by a skilled jockey, and that he has no real match in that race. George thought Rocket was the best horse to bet on. He, therefore, bets a large sum of money on Rocket's victory. And when the starting gun fired, Rocket did not leave the starting platform, but rested in place, until all the horses had reached the finish line. In view of the information collected by George, what Rocket did was a black swan event. But on the other hand, it may be an expected event for a number of people who have more information and more relevance to the events of that particular race. For example, the owner of the mare, Rocket, was aware that he had been subjected to rigorous training in the days leading up to the race. Therefore, the mare's owner made a bet against her in anticipation that she might become stubborn and refuse to compete with other horses. Although the amount of additional information the mare's owner had may have been very small, it avoided him from falling into the trap of a black swan event. The magnitude of the impact that black swan events produce can also vary widely. Instead of affecting just individuals, entire societies can fall victim to black swan events. When this happens, the Black Swan event can change the way we understand the world in many areas, such as philosophy, medicine, and physics. For example, when Copernicus proposed that the Earth was not the center of the universe, the consequences were enormous for him, his society, and the world at large. The discovery made by Copernicus was a blatant challenge to the authority of the ruling Catholic Church, as well as to the historical authority of the Church's teachings and interpretations of the Bible. In the end, the discovery of Copernicus was a new beginning for the establishment of a new understanding and new beliefs in all European societies. The idea is that the impact of Black Swan events can be different for different people and societies, and may result from ignorance of a small amount of information. Humans often believe that the past is a good indicator of what the future may hold, so they tend to create expectations based on what they know from the past. In fact, this belief may make us vulnerable to errors, because there are many unknown factors that can conflict with our accounts and understanding of past events. For example, imagine that you are a rooster living on a farm, and over the years the farmer has been feeding you and sheltering you in a barn that warms you from the cold of winter, and in the summer it allows you to roam freely around the farm. If you use the past as an indicator of what will happen to you in the future, you will find no convincing reason to believe that tomorrow will hold something different for you. But alas, tomorrow is Thanksgiving Day, when the peasant comes to chop off your head, fill you with spices, throw you into the oven, and eat you at dinner with his family. To think that we can predict the future based on what we know in the past is a fallacy with disastrous consequences. There is also a similar fallacy common to humans, which is rooting or affirmation. When people hold a certain belief in any aspect of life, they often only look for evidence that confirms those beliefs, to the extent that they ignore any evidence that contradicts these evidences. When we encounter information that contradicts what we already believe, we tend not to accept or analyze it impartially. Rather, it is more likely that we are looking for sources that undermine and deny this information. For example, if you strongly believe that global warming and climate change are nothing but a conspiracy or a myth, and then you happen to watch a documentary about scientific evidence about climate change, you will probably get angry and rush to look for sources to refute what was stated in the documentary. And if you then search the internet for information about climate change, the search terms you use are likely to be climate change hoax and not evidence of climate change. The idea here is that past events may give us false indications of predicting the future, and we tend to ground our beliefs in certain ideas with appropriate evidence for our beliefs. Let's go back in time to nearly 90 years, specifically to the year 1928. Let's assume that you are an investor in the stock market, and you have decided to start your investments by buying shares in the American market. Before you take this step, and as any keen investor, you have studied the statistics of the American stock market in the past 8 years, from 1920 to 1928. That is, 1 year before the largest collapse of the American stock market in the history of the United States of America, which occurred in 1929. During your study of the stock market before entering the U.S. market, you may have noticed some small declines and rises, but in general, you may have noticed the upward trend of the market, with your belief that this upward trend will continue. You decide and invest your savings in the U.S. stock market. The next day, despite your detailed analytics, the market crashes, and you lose everything. This scenario brings us back to the principle of ignorance of information that may be small, but it is very important. If you had studied the market a little more than 8 years ago, you would have noticed many bubble highs followed by major crashes throughout history. Thus, when we focus only on the information we know, we open ourselves up to a great risk that we did not take into account. On the other hand, if we can at least identify what we don't know, we can greatly reduce the risk. You may have heard the phrase knowledge is power. The knowledge we possess may often constitute limitations to our understanding of many events or expectations. In fact, by focusing only on what you know, you limit your awareness of all possible outcomes of a given event and create fertile ground for black swan events. The idea here is that realizing that you do not know some data and information may help you assess the risks before making any decision,